Football chicken is going on over in Argentina, folks. Why do I say that? Well, let me get this light first. Yeah, should have adjusted it when I started. Football chicken is going on in Argentina. Chicken, of course, seeing, of course, two cars going right after each other because they're going right head to head. And who's gonna be the one that ends up flinching? Who ends up being the one? And who am I talking about? Who is who? Well, of course, on one side is AFA. On one side is FIFA. On one side is CONMEBOL. On the other side is the Argentine government and many individuals that are supporting President Javier Milei. There is a very interesting aspect of Argentine football that is never talked about, of course, especially in English. I have to go again. And who's the reference when it comes to Argentine football? Well, many of these Argentines abroad sites that end up talking about how great the national team is and how wonderful the national team is and the national team this and the national team that and the national team this, and Messi's the GOAT and this and that and the other, which is all fine and it's cool. But they don't tell you another story that's going on. And it's the problems that are going on internally within the Argentine FA and the problems that are going on within Argentine football itself that kind of put them in a very complicated situation. Now, let me put myself on the record and hopefully I don't end up having this used as, oh, you said this and, oh, you see, you were wrong. Probably, I might be wrong. But I would be confident that nothing will happen in terms of play being stopped, football being stopped. Because then you have a third, if you want to call them that, which is the fans. Although the fans would end up siding more with the football players and the federation than they would with the current Argentine government. Because a government should not have as their number one priority football, especially a country with the inflation rate that it currently has, with the currency issues that they're having, with the economic and social political issues that are going on in Argentina. The last thing that a government should be worried about is football. So, again, understand that the football is the queen in a chess piece or the bishop or something along those lines. If you it's an important piece to be able to maneuver everything else. You kind of change the rules of the game. You kind of change and tilt the game in your favor or not, depending on how you move it or how you don't. That's what football is in art. Football is a very political thing. It's a very politicized piece in terms of the overall gamut of what is Argentine politics. There's a lot of diplomatic, international relations. Keep in mind that one of, as crazy as it sounds, one of the biggest entries of income or revenue or GDP, and to a certain extent, I'm not saying it's huge, but it's part of it. It's a huge generator of income for teams, for federations, for the investment, is football. Whether it's through player sales, look, the Argentine national team, just on publicity, just on its own revenue. I mean, you have to go back to 2016. And I remember because I was covering that Copa America when Leo Messi was paying out of his own pocket the payroll, the salary of the employees at AFA. The cooks, the people that clean, the people that mow the lawn, those types of people. He had them, he was paying for their salaries at that point out of his own pocket. The players in Argentina, the Copa America in 2016, here in the United States, were paying the travel and hotel out of their own pocket. Now, 8 years later, the Argentine national team is generating somewhere around $80 to $100 million a year in commercial revenue. Remember at the beginning of the year when China basically said, your guys are done? How they end up backtracking and moving around and doing a lot of verbal and diplomatic gymnastics? Well, that wasn't part of it because a great deal of that money from the Argentine national team comes from China. So there's that. Of course, they're trying to switch over, see if they can get some money from the United States as well. Javier Milei wants basically to take over football because he wants to implement the anonymous corporations, the privatization of football in Argentina when it's historically been a club-oriented sport for nonprofits. And it's very difficult for teams to have that social profession, the difference between having a social club where families and friends get together and go. And I've said this quite often, be it not in my videos, but also in terms of matches that I've done commentary, because I've had people come and ask me those things, so I basically say it on air. There's a balance between teams having to, or clubs, having a social club with a pool, with, I guess, like summer vacation or summer camps. Some even have schools. Some even have primary, secondary, university, tertiary schools. And other sports, volleyball, basketball, roller hockey, field hockey, you name it, judo, karate, swimming, diving, etc., etc., etc. You have that, and then you have a professional side, which ends up being the football team, which is the one that brings in the revenue to the club, or the greatest amount of revenue to the club, outside of the monthly dues that club members pay. Well, Javier Milei wants to get rid of that to an extent. So that ends up being a major issue. And of course, he's willing to do whatever it takes to be able to change that status quo. And when it comes to what Milei is looking to do, there's a lot of people that are in favor of it. And I understand it, because you do need some fresh money coming into Argentina. That's understandable. And of course, I'm looking at it from a very neutral and a very distant standpoint, that there's a need for investors to come in. But at what cost? At what cost are you bringing in investors? Because a lot of investors are looking at football as a gateway into Argentina to be able to find some lithium and find, land, and to find other things, meat exportation, things of that nature, to implement when it comes to their businesses. Football's that gateway. Whether it's good or bad, that's another issue. I'm not going to get into that, because I need to speak to someone that's more knowledgeable about that facet than I am, to be quite honest with you. So all of that is included. But with privatization comes an issue that the investment comes with conditions. Well, if I'm not getting if there's no ROI, this is simple business. I invest money and I'm not getting an investment, I'm pulling my money out. What happens at that moment? Well, teams go bankrupt, and there's no safety net for these clubs if that were to happen. So you have that issue as well. You have investment with conditions, as I said before. Sometimes those conditions are, oh, by the way, the young players, well, as soon as they're done, we're taking them out, we're selling them. We'll give you $100,000 for them, and we go and send them to Europe, and then we end up selling them to another European club for $100 million. And the percentage is basically nothing, so you end up getting nothing, because the player wasn't owned by the club. It was owned by the person, by the investor. So the investor is the one that gets the kickback, not the club. So there's a lot to delve into in terms of that. Of course, AFA's completely against it, because not only that, Chiqui Tapia would end up losing basically his position of power within AFA and within CONMEBOL while we're at it. Why not? So when it all is said and done, there's, again, like I said, there's two freight trains playing chicken. Who's gonna end up flinching? Who's gonna end up, proverbially speaking, jumping the track and avoiding the collision? On the other end, The government wants to do everything possible to be able to bring in people like those foreign investors. There's been a lot of talk about people, Foster Gillette, Jorge Mas has been spoken to, David Beckham has been mentioned in terms of Jorge Mas more than David Beckham, to be honest with you. There's been many others, people, emirs from Qatar, from Saudi Arabia, that are looking to go into South America, or specifically Argentina, because to be able to get those young players, you get them young, you get them when they're cheap, you take them somewhere else, you can sell them for quite a bit of money. And then you end up taking basically the entire cut, to not say all of it. Because at the end of the day, when it's a privatized fund, well, the money goes to the privatized fund. It doesn't go to the club per se. The money ends up going to the privatized club, and who ends up being, I put in the money to invest in a kid. The kid, I bring him out at 17, 18. I take him over to Portugal, let's say. I sell him to Porto or Benfica or whatever. Benfica then ends up selling him for 100 million to Real Madrid. Guess who ends up getting a cut of that, of all that? The club doesn't. And you think I'm going to be able to, that money that I'm bringing in, you think I'm going to reinvest it in the club that originally took the kid out from? No. So the club's basically shit out of luck because they have to find other ways, which some will, depending on how organized and how, just look, there's good privatizations or investors that have come in. Independiente del Valle is probably one of the most important ones in terms of that. There have been others like Montevideo City Torque, which is a city group club, city football group. Well, they end up basically running that team into the ground, and now they're in the second division Uruguay. So you have extremes. You have other teams. I mean, there's a lot more negatives in South America than there are positives, although there are a lot of positives as well. You look at Chilean football right now and the situation they're going through in terms of that. They've already implemented it. And Chilean football struggling mightily. If not, just look at how they lost to Colombia the other day. Of course, you can see it in my other video. So when it comes to that, well, you have to start analyzing things a little bit more. But again, this is not the most dangerous part. The most dangerous part is that the Argentine government is now talking about, depending on how things play out in tomorrow's, of course, I'm recording on a Wednesday, on tomorrow's meeting at AFA, how things go, what are they going to implement, what are they not going to implement, that the Argentine government could come in and intervene on AFA, which would be probably the stupidest thing you could do. Because if you intervene as a government, obviously FIFA says, hey, by the way, you can't do that. Argentine FA, you are disaffiliated. Imagine if Argentina could not play the World Cup, hypothetically speaking, okay? I'm not saying this is going to happen. Because the government came in and intervened, Argentina can't defend their World Cup title in 2 years from now. Well, that is a possibility. Very minimal, because I don't think it's going to happen. Very improbable, because I don't think they're that dumb to go ahead, or that dumb in combination with egocentrical, although I wouldn't be surprised with Javier Milei, to finally go and say, oh, really? Here you go. I don't think that's because then you end up not only killing the game, because then then the game would basically stop in Argentina. But not only that, everybody, I don't care who you are. I don't care who you are. If that ends up happening, you end up having something very complicated and very, indeed, something you don't want to happen, because you're going to have the entire country against you, even the people that back you. So with that in mind, we'll see what ends up happening, because we're bound to have a very interesting set of circumstances in the coming 48 hours. Talk to you guys later. Ciao.